do you
please.
want to open up the GitHub like list of issues? Would that be?
Let's see. Yep.
There's a lot of issues.
Yeah. All right. Let's see.
Like maybe the high priority ones you can filter by, or sorry, I just
Yeah.
thought maybe it'd be helpful for people to be able to see like um, the issues.
Totally. I think there's a ZenHub board. If you install ZenHub, let's see.
It's actually also quite helpful to see this because yesterday I tried to find. I wasn't. So what you explained about Auspice versus I think the backend one, that was helpful also because yesterday I was trying to find the issues in the Zen hub and
Right.
I couldn't. I wasn't sure where to find it.
Right. So end-to-end testing is one of the ones that I think is most urgent to accelerating. Well, it's also fundamental to having more contributors, right? If the more contributors we have to Nextstrain in general, the more work has to be done making sure that all of the features that are pull requested are not breaking pre-existing functionality. So that creates a testing burden on the lab. And so, that automating some of the quality assurance is good. That's something that is so change color by to X, then to Y, change geo resolution to X, move between all four tree layouts, making those tests happen. That's something that the community can definitely plug into. Another thing is just general performance audits, and I think where that's really going to lead almost immediately is like, well, we need to really get off of SVG for having thousands of items in the tree or in the map. This is obviously not a particularly it's like for transitioning between this is not a very high frame rate to transition the 6-year seasonal flu because there's 2,000 genomes over 9 years there in that one. So that's another example. So let's see. We've got if you happen to be focused on Python and backend, I think there are some performance speedups implied in the backend as well. Yep, and that's an area for performance. And let's see. I suppose I'm just going to stop sharing for a moment. Let me find just a moment. Apologies for this. I should have had this one ready. There are also some issues around narratives, and so if you some bugs in narratives, and that's I think that actually is a useful thing to show. Just a moment. Okay, so let's share here and say I'm going to share browser. All right. If we go back to Nextstrain in general, you can see that there's a situation report here. And the situation report replaces the left sidebar where the left sidebar was driven by the user, and the user was telling stories. Now, the left sidebar is driven by the you can see that the URL bar up here, and this is a markdown format that the this was actually this was done by developers in the lab after I left. This is really awesome addition to have mobile and responsive scrollable narratives. So you could kind of tell a story using the tree, and this one's kind of neat. Like the two sequences from Rome are directly connected to each other, and both have a travel history to China. We switch to divergence to show that two Italian sequences are identical, while other nearby sequences from England, Brazil, Switzerland, USA are actually separated by the Italian sequences by 2 to 4 mutations. The Brazilian sequences travel to Milan, etc. So it's really about the kind of once you get now that you kind of understand the interface and what it's showing, now it's kind of getting into the okay, but what were the places and what were the it's that same technique, but now it's it's specific to the virus and specific to the locale, and kind of making inferences based on like this one, right? Let's see, and then yep, sequences from the greater area. These sequences from the greater Seattle area cluster together. They strongly suggest community spread and that SARS-CoV virus has been circulating in the area for some time already. So that's a pretty good that's a good example. So then credits. All right, so there you go. That's another thing, another area that there are issues for. And so if I go back here, you'll see that there are narrative issue. So if you look for narrative, I don't know if it'll pull up issues that are specific to that. So that's something that if you're passionate about working on more of the reporting side, there's room to improve that as well. So I think that's basically like there's a big bucket of performance stuff, there's a big bucket of testing stuff, and then there's some of these kind of like little issues like colorblind friendly colors, and maybe there's a mode. It seems reasonable that someone could pull request a mode for colorblind users that uses a different color scale.
I think that'd be really helpful to have those like buckets too, because I think for example people like me that are more data visualization and like visual story focused, we might be more interested in like the narratives one. So it's really helpful to be able to know that like there is actually a tag for it that we can filter by.
Right.
Then is there, this is purely out of my own curiosity as a dev. I just I just want to know how that narrative is implemented.
Oh yeah, yeah. So let me go back to the Git. If we go to the GitHub, I believe we should see. Oh, we might need to go back to Nextstrain, and then there should be a narratives repo. All right, let's see. Yeah, so if we go 15 hours ago to the situation report, I think that might have been the one that we were just looking at. You've got an executive. Let's go to raw here. So it allows the scientist to write a markdown, and then it kind of consumes it and uses the header. There you go. And then this, let's see. I think it's this right here. So yeah, here we present.
Oh, brilliant.
So it uses the URL. You can deep link to any place in the tree, and so the URL. So because of that, you can drive the components off of the router, and thus you can drive this off the router too.
Okay, that is super exciting to me because that was like my biggest question when you were showing the narrative. I was like, how do you link each section to like these different visuals? Like how, because like I'm guessing that the people writing these narratives like wouldn't necessarily be developers. So I was like, how are they specifying? And
that's right.
Actually is like an exciting part that I like forgot to comment on earlier, which is I absolutely love how every single action is you have a route for. And thus, like the sharing of like, and that like I'm sure is 100% intentional, because then like when people are exploring, it makes it so much easier to share the view that they're looking at and comment on it.
That's right. So if the idea is to allow, public health officials to tell, one of some quadrillion number of possible combinatoric stories here, then we can say like, Paris, and then it's going to give us location Paris, and then radial, and then it's going to give us, it's going to give us this chart, and then someone can link someone else directly to what they're seeing. And so that is, you're right. You're absolutely right. That is intentional, and that's an important aspect to be able to pass links around on email.
Yes.
It's basically like bringing the interface and bringing the exploration and bringing the storytelling to where the people are working already, which is like, I can text you a link, I can email you a link, and I can say, hey, look at this, or I can share application state. Obviously, it's not always possible to shove all of your application state into the router,
Mhm.
with explorers, but in this case, there's quite a bit that we can shove into the router.
I think that's absolutely brilliant. And I think the fact that you and, or like that the lab has kind of taken that into the next step of being able to be like, okay, so if we can pass around these links and
That's
then
right.
like comment on it, why don't we make a whole narrative section where we could just use Markdown and then
That's
link
right.
to the views? That's so exciting.
It's I think it's a really neat pattern for data exploration interfaces, and it's pretty involved to maintain too. So that's something that, yeah, if there's any developers out there who are who are similarly excited, that is definitely an area where the surface area for bugs there is also, I think, it's a complicated feature. Awesome.
Awesome. I feel like we covered so much. Um,
Oh, thanks a ton for all your questions. It's really great.
Yeah, no, thank you for answering all of them. I guess the very last question I have, um, which is, unless there's more things you want to cover.
I think we're 2 hours in, so we can
Yeah,
we can let
I think we would,
let them off the hook out there.
yeah.
Yeah.